Okay, we're going to be talking about social learning theory. So, social learning theory proposes that learning behaviors and attitudes and reactions to things happens not just through direct experience, but rather through observation and imitation of the ones around us. For learning to happen, they must satisfy these four pillars. The first one being attention. The learner must pay attention to the behavior being modeled. The second one being retention. The learner must remember the behavior that they just modeled. The third one being reproduction. Reproduction just means that the learner has to have the ability to actually reproduce the behavior exhibited. And the fourth one is motivation. The learner must have some sort of motivation for performing that action. And there are three types of models that can really influence learners. And the first one is a live model, so people who are right there in front of you. The second one is a verbal model, so they don't have to be physically there, but the sound of someone's voice. And then the third one is a symbolic model, and these can be from maybe symbols in TV shows and movies and people you follow online. So the really key experiment that founded this theory was Bandura's Bobo Beatdown. And what happened here was he got a bunch of children and he took baseline measurements from their kindergarten teachers, I think, of how aggressive they were, like on a normal basis. And they asked a lot of people to do this, so there was a higher level of inter-rater reliability that the ratings they were giving were actually correct. And then that was the baseline measurement of the children without modeling influences. Then he separated the kids into different rooms, and in these rooms there were toys. And what was shown was that he told the kids they couldn't play with these toys, which as a kid it is pretty frustrating to hear. But then he introduced models, and these models would get mad at something and then they would beat down a doll around them. So the kids observed this model in front of them performing these rather violent movements, and the kind of outcome of this experiment was just that kids tended to imitate these aggressive movements even if they hadn't started out with a high aggressive baseline measurement. And if we're going to explore the psychological concepts of measurement here, the triangulation collection of data was employed because different researchers actually observed the kids in these rooms, which allowed for a higher inter-rater reliability again because there was no singular bias from the researcher side. So the validity of the findings were actually quite strong. And then also on an ethical perspective, there were definitely some considerations on whether or not these kids would pick up these aggressive traits over time and retain them. But I don't know if that was further to discuss. But it's not a huge ethical responsibility that was then held for a later amount of time. So two things that they found from this. The first one was vicarious reinforcement. So people tend to imitate behaviors when they realize that the person who is exhibiting the behavior is being rewarded to do so. And the second one is in-group bias. So we tend to identify and copy the behaviors of those who look similar to us. So an application in real-life setting is parenting, or just in a school setting. So a lot of kids actually pick up traits from their parents. Maybe they didn't grow up in the most stable household, and involuntarily they kind of develop some of these traits. Or in a school setting, you would want to, model certain types of behaviors for your children, so they then pick up these behaviors and imitate and learn from those. And that is social learning theory. Social learning theory really applies more to the kind of behavioral aspect of people rather than the actual, intellectual learning development of the brain, academically speaking. Yeah.